Hi there. Today I'm going to be doing a demonstration of a new Magic format that I have designed called Siege the Castle. This is a format that you can play by yourself. The deck that you play against sort of self-automates in a way that just playing two decks against each other doesn't emulate. So the basic premise is you are a hero and you are sieging a villain's castle. So this board represents the villain's base. It's full of monsters. There's minions, goons, and lieutenants, and that's in ascending order of like card strength as well. Then there's spells. There's the basic spells and epic spells. And the way this game works is you play a normal deck of Magic against it. And this board just randomly generates creatures and spells for you to fight through. And the goal is to kill the villain in a normal game of Magic. There's a Google Docs that has the full rule explanation. I suggest watching or reading that first. This will just make everything click for you really easily after you read it. And then in the Google Docs, the base rules is for 2 players against the villain. So I'm going to show you the difficulty modifier to play it 1 player. So for a 1-player game, you're going to start with your villain board, but you're going to put a -1 counter on each of the monster decks. And each time that you would place a counter on one of these decks for the first time, instead you remove the -1 counter. So in a game of Siege the Castle, the player always goes first. Since it's solo, I don't draw. I'm playing my janky Affinity deck, which has turned out to be a pretty good matchup for this villain. So for the first turn, all I'm going to do is play Darksteel Citadel and an Ornithopter. Then for the villain's turn, they try to put a die on the minion's deck, and they can't, so they remove the -1 counter. Passes the turn back to me. Draw my card. I'm going to play Seat of the Synod and play Sage of Latnam. Pass back to the villain. So now the villain places a counter on the minion's deck, and minions spawn at a rate where whenever you place a counter on the minion's deck, you then spawn that many minions. So we'll spawn 1. Got a Night Market Lookout, not too scary. So then the villain passes back. Alright, so I'm going to attack for 1, putting the villains to 19, and then I'm going to cast a Somber Hoverguard. Going back to the villain, add another counter to the minion's deck, so now we summon 2 minions. So you can kind of see how this gets out of hand very quickly. Giant Scorpion and Scavenging Harpy. Nothing in the graveyard, so we'll pass back. I'm going to play a Frogmite and a Thoughtcast. And then a Great Furnace. And the attacks are kind of bad. I don't really want to trade Somber Hoverguard with Scavenging Harpy, but I think I'm gonna. One note from the the rules that is kind of vague. The way that you make decisions for the villain is with perfect information of what you have in your hand as a player. That means you cannot blow the villain out with an unseen pump spell, what have you. The villain knows what you have, so you try to play accordingly. Whenever you make decisions for the villain, you should be trying to do it in the way that blows you out the hardest. Alright, so we're done. So we're going to go back to the villain. On this turn, the villain goes to add a counter to the goons deck. The way that the counters work is counters have a preference for being placed as far right as they can go. However, a counter can only be placed if the deck to the left would have more counters after that counter is placed. So now that there's two counters on the minion deck, the goons deck can have one added to it. It's like a pyramid conceptually. The base has to be wider than the next level. So we'll remove this. And they're still not good attacks. We're gonna keep this giant scorpion back for a blocker. Yeah. All right, so drew a hangerback walker. Gonna throw two counters on there. I have a metallic rebuke in my hand. Pass back to the villains. So now they add a counter to the goons deck, and the goons spawn at a rate where you make it's half the number of counters on the goons deck rounded up. So 1 die, 1 goons, 2 die, 1 goons, 3 die, 2 goons, etc. Also, when you add the first counter of the game to the goons deck, you add a d6 to the spell die pool. When the villain is spawning and preparing monsters and spells, they don't go to its hand, they go to exile, and then the villain can cast those cards at any point throughout its turn, whenever it's most advantageous to the villain, without paying their mana cost. So now we're going to spawn a goons. So we got a Faceless Butcher, and we're going to roll the spell die. If it's a 1, it fizzles and it does nothing. If it's 2 to 5, you prepare a basic spell, and if it's a 6, you prepare an epic spell. Got a 4. So we've got Minions Return and Faceless Butcher. That seems like a fun combo. We're going to do that. So we're going to play Faceless Butcher. We're going to get Hangerback Walker. And then put Minions Return on Faceless Butcher. Oh, wait. So that's still going to happen, but I'm going to sacrifice this to Sage of Latinam. So I've got tokens, and I draw a card. And then Minions Return on that guy. Take my turn. I'm going to play Pilgrim's Eye for a mountain. And Prophetic Prism. And then Myrrh Enforcer. And we'll attack for 2 in the air. Drawing first blood. Okay. So now it doesn't go to the lieutenants because there's only one in the goons. And it doesn't go to 2 in the goons because there's only 2 in the minions. So you put the next counter in the minions spot and you roll the spell die. So we're going to prepare a basic spell and spawn 3 minions. So they're going to make Wailing Ghoul, Irreverent Revelers, Bloodflow Connoisseur, and Mind Rot. So I'll get Mind Rotted. I'm just going to discard this Metallic Rebuke because honestly I haven't thought about whether or not the villain should be able to pay stuff like this. The villain gets to use an activated ability on any of its cards once per round, and it gets to cast its cards for free, but I'm not sure if that extends to this. It's just a question of the rules. I didn't think about this card when I chose this deck for this video. So, into the bin it goes for Mind Rot. Wailing Ghoul, that mills 2 cards when it comes into play. If the villain has a card that manipulates one of its decks, the deck that it manipulates is the deck that that card came from. So Wailing Ghoul is a minion, so we mill the minion deck 2. So we'll mill Lamphead of Death's Vigil and Shambling Goblin. Irreverent Revelers is going to come in and target I'm going to get one of these tokens, draw a card in response, and pass the turn. I'm going to attack in the air for 2. I'm going to attack with Mirror Enforcer. I'm going to sacrifice Faceless Butcher to have it come back, targeting Mirror Enforcer, and I'm going to draw a card. So then, villain takes 2. And I'm going to cast a Pilgrim's Eye, getting an island, and Maverick Thopterist. Making 2 Thopters. So now we add a counter to the Goons deck. We still spawn that 1 Goon because it's half rounded up. So Mire Triton, and we spell. So we prepare an epic spell. So we'll play God Pharaoh's Statue and Mire Triton, milling 2 Goons, Fire Fiend Elemental, and Swarm of Bloodflies. Let's see. Defending player. I only have 2 2s and 1 1s. So we're just gonna get in there. Block there. I think I'm going to keep my flyers for damage. 5. It's a 15 me, 17 villain. End of the villain's turn, I lose life. Alright. I'm going to Ensoul Artifact, Ornithopter, and I'm going to attack for 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 in the air, which it cannot do anything about. Oh, I have to pay 2 more mana. Alright, game is getting close. So now we're going to take the counter off of the lieutenant's deck and just roll the spell die. Got a 5. I drew turn against. That's perfect. I'm going to take the Ornithopter and I'll sack it because he's just going to kill it to Bloodflow Connoisseur. So let's see now. I've got 1 blocker. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh shoot, I die. I shouldn't have attacked with all my guys. So I'm going to block Mire Triton, take 4, and then I take a 5th damage from Godfarer's statue at the end of my turn. But for sake of the demonstration that I didn't misplay and I killed myself to the villain right away, this is how the villain's next turn would proceed. So the villain would add a +1/+1, or would just add a counter to the lieutenant's deck, and then every time you add a counter to the lieutenant's deck, you spawn 1 lieutenant. Also, whenever you add a counter to the lieutenant's deck, you add another die to the spell die pool. So we're going to spawn 1 lieutenant. We got Clackbridge Troll. And we're going to spawn 2 basic spells, Violent Impact and Murder. So yeah, with all of that, probably dead. Anyways, yeah, I hope that was informative to show you how the first few turns of Siege the Castle goes. If it turns out for whatever reason that it's too easy for you, you could challenge yourself by, say, only starting with like 2 -1 counters on it, what have you. But my recommendation is to make the villain deck fairly underpowered. Like, you saw that I have like bad draft chaff 1/1s in the minions deck, but my like foe affinity deck still lost to it just because they get so many free cards. I encourage you to try it out and yeah, let me know how it goes. Thanks for watching.